Darling, you send me. I know you send me. Darling, you send me. I know you send me.
Hey guys, it's Lauren, and for today's video, I'm going to give you a flip through of the bullet journal spreads that I've made from January all the way through July. I hope this video will be a little bit informative and maybe give you some inspiration for what you'd like to include in your own bullet journal. I'm going to try not to talk too much in this video and just let you guys see the spreads for what they are. So without further ado, let's get started. So here we have my cover for my bullet journal. Right now I'm using a Leuchtturm in gray, and I just have two stickers on my bullet journal, keeping it really simple. One of them says Mayor of London, which a lot of people have made fun of me for, but yeah. So when you first open the book, you reach the name and address page. So I just have my name written down, and for the address I slapped on a London sticker, kind of to match the theme that I had set with my Mayor of London sticker on the cover. Next we have our table of contents, which I don't use personally because I never really look back at this page, but of course there are a lot of great uses for it, especially if you want to quickly flip back and forth between your pages. Here we have my cover page, which is also quite sadly my favorite spread in this whole book. And usually I don't do cover pages, but since this was the first official spread in my book, I thought it'd be a really good way to start my bullet journal. Here's my yearly calendar. So on these two pages, I wrote down all the days of the month, and the way this works is, whenever I know I have an event coming up in a future month, I write that down on this page, and then when I reach that month and make my monthly calendar for it, I come back to this page and write down any of the events that were already written down here. And I think this page is really helpful because it helps me plan out and keep track of all the events that are coming up in the far future instead of just the ones that are happening in the current month. This is my monthly calendar for January. At this point, I wasn't sure how I wanted to format my monthly calendar, so I did a lot of experimenting throughout the months, but here I just made small boxes with enough space to write a few events for each day, and I highlighted in green the days where I had something written down. For January and February, I was really into beige and dark green/olive tones, so you'll see those two colors together for the next couple of spreads. Next we have my first weekly spread. At this point, I was still in school, so I was mainly writing down the assignments that I had, not so much what happened in each day. I also wrote down my meals just to keep myself accountable for healthy eating, and like I said earlier, you can see my color palette on the right side, which consists of green, an earthy brown, and a light beige. I also began to use a lot of grid paper in my spreads. I'd say that in almost every spread from this point, I use grid paper in some way. And I also included this picture that I found off the internet, and if you're looking for ways to fill your pages, I'd say this is a great way to do so. On the right, you can see my first spread of February. On the left, I wrote down some of the songs I was listening to as I was bullet journaling, and on the right side of the page, I wrote down a short entry of some of the important things that had happened between the tail end of January and the beginning of February. You might notice that I don't really do weekly spreads, rather I have 1 or 2 days on each spread, and this is because during this time I wasn't bullet journaling very consistently, and I found it really hard to finish a spread if I didn't make the whole thing in one sitting, so only including 1 or 2 days on each spread was my way of making bullet journaling easier for me. On the right, we have my collab with Sleepy Tofu on Instagram. I'm pretty sure I made a plan with me for this spread, so make sure to go check that out. But for this collab, we picked a theme and tried to incorporate it throughout the spread, and I failed pretty epically, but I still think the colors in this spread are super pretty. Here's my February calendar. For this spread, I followed what I had done in January with my beige and green tones and also highlighting the boxes where I had events in green. But this was also the last time that I made my calendar like this because I realized that it just wasn't working for me anymore and I just wasn't really a fan of the layout. So in the future months, I started experimenting more with different layouts. With that being said, here's my March calendar. I scrapped the green and started only using beige and a lot of grid paper, and even though there isn't a lot of color, I still love how clean and crisp the spread looks. The spread on the left was a collab with Joey, aka RTJuju on Instagram. I noticed that at the time that we did this collab, she was using a lot of artwork in her spread, so that's why I used this portrait of a man from a Smithsonian magazine or something. And yeah, I used much deeper colors than I usually do to match the portrait colors, but I still really like the maroon and the deep brown tones. On the right is one of my favorite spreads because it has a couple of the things that I really like, which are magazine cutouts, modern bubble letters, and pretty colors. I really like the glossy look of magazines, so the basket cutout stood out to me in that way. And then I also really like the color of the sticker on the top right that I got from Swatelier, and also how it matches really nicely with this washi tape under it that I got from Daiso. And then at the bottom here, I made a calendar of my work schedule for that week because my March calendar was a little too small to fit my work times. Here's my April calendar. I kind of followed what I had done in March with the pasting of grid paper into the notebook and then making the calendar on top of that. Again, this calendar was really cramped and I wasn't able to fit a lot of the things that I needed to, but one interesting thing that I had done in this calendar specifically was I kind of color coded all of my events. So for my work schedule, all of my work times are highlighted in tan, and then the times when I planned on going to the gym were boxed. And that was an easy way to distinguish between the clutter of events that I had written in my calendar. Moving on, here's my next spread. I kind of rushed this one, as you can tell there's not as much detail or effort that was put into the spread, and I think at this point I was really just experimenting with my style and trying to figure out what I liked in my spreads and what I didn't. And one thing that I learned was that I was still really into the look of line drawings and boxy bubbly letters. Here's my May spread. I don't have much to say about this one, but I just wrote my homework on the left side, and then on the right, I wrote a small journal entry of my hopes for the future and just any events that had happened around that time. This May calendar is a little bit interesting. I didn't make a full monthly calendar for May because I wasn't really journaling consistently at this time, but I did make the calendar for the last 2 weeks. I am actually a fan of this spread. I think the colors in it are really nice, and I like how the tan and the blue go really well together, but at the same time the spread was different from my typical style, so I felt like that kind of confused me even more on what my style was. And I remember I posted a picture of this spread on my Tumblr and I captioned it something like, "I'm in such a style crisis, I don't know what my style is anymore." So yeah, I really liked the spread, but it was also kind of discouraging. Once again, for June, I stuck with the grid style calendar, except this time it covered 2 pages. I'm not really a fan of this one. I think it lacks a lot of detail, but at this point, I did realize that my monthly calendars needed 2 pages because in previous months I left absolutely no space in the boxes for me to write down everything that I needed to. This is a spread that I made in the middle of June. I think that this one is probably the most important spread content-wise because around this time there were just a lot of things going on and I kept telling myself that I wanted to journal every day so that I could remember and record all of the important events, but I never got around to doing it, so this spread was my way of being lazy but also doing what needed to get done. I wrote a small summary / timeline of all the things that happened around this time, so if I read through, I can see everything that I did all at once during this time. And then for my colors, I just stuck with my normal tan and beige tones, and I also included this picture on the bottom of my friend and me at a senior banquet. On the right, I never got around to finishing this spread, and I don't know if I ever will. I don't really like leaving empty pages, but at this point, I don't know how I'm going to fill up this spread yet, so maybe I'll finish it someday. Who knows? Once again, here's another spread that really confused me and showed that I was still experimenting with my own style. I didn't use any of my normal colors, and instead I just played around with brighter colors and a less structured layout. I like how it turned out, and I think it was really interesting to see what other styles I was capable of doing. Here's my July calendar. I kind of did it in a rush, and I still wanted to incorporate grid paper in some way without covering the entire page with it, so that's why for some of the events I wrote them on grid paper and pasted into some of the boxes. This calendar isn't finished yet, so I think I'll have more of an opinion on it as I fill it in a little bit more, but as of right now, I'm just really confused about the colors and the style and just what's going on in general. And now we've reached my last page. I'm still working on it, but I started this spread last week, and so far I'm really liking it. I think I'm starting to figure out what I'm into because when I was looking for ways to fill in the spread, I kind of realized that I like it more when it's less filled and cluttered, so I think that for this spread and maybe future ones, I'll make it a little bit less detailed and just keep it as bare and minimalistic as possible. But I don't know, it's still a work in progress, and I'm trying to figure things out because I keep doing janky things with my spreads, so we'll see. But yeah, this is the end of my bullet journal flip through for 2019, and hopefully this was helpful in some way. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.